Welcome to the Common Man Football Show. My name is James Coburn, and today's episode, we're talking about the Minnesota Vikings 2018 NFL Draft Class based on analytics. And in this video, we're going to go through every single pick that the Minnesota Vikings selected and look at what their potential is based on athleticism and production data over the course of many draft classes to see if they shared any of the traits of previous successful outcomes. So if you're new to the channel and new to the work that I do, all terms and definitions will be in the description. So if you're not familiar with what explosive lower body strength score is or market share data, etc., just go to the description and all the sort of terms and definitions will be there. Or you could also watch previous videos as well on the topics at hand and get sort of a better perspective on it. With all that stuff out of the way, let's get to the first pick for the Minnesota Vikings and Mike Hughes, cornerback out of Central Florida. When you get to his production data, he had a 51.32 solo tackle score and an 85.57 pass deflection score. Pretty good pass deflection, as you can clearly see, above the average All-Pro and Pro Bowl score, but definitely not the best solo tackle data. Doesn't quite hit near the All-Pro/Pro Bowl area. But the pass deflection data is pretty decent. So we'll see what happens ultimately with Mike Hughes. But the only sort of thing that kind of drags his profile down is his solo tackle data. And then when he gets his athleticism traits, 68.28 in terms of explosiveness, 45.88 in terms of speed, and 82.81 in terms of flexibility for his size. Doesn't quite have All-Pro or Pro Bowl potential because of his speed score. Speed is not exactly his best all-around trait. In many ways, Joshua Jackson is kind of a better version of Mike Hughes, more productive, more athletic in terms of explosiveness and flexibility. The speed score is a little bit worse for Joshua Jackson. But again, if you're going to make a bet on a guy like this, on a cornerback like this, then you would want to go with the more productive one. The Vikings didn't really do that. I do think there's a good chance that Mike Hughes can become a long-term starter. But definitely doesn't have high-end upside based on his athleticism traits and based on his production in terms of solo tackle data. And of course, you get to Brian ONeill, offensive tackle out of Pittsburgh. When you get to his athleticism traits, 40.08 in terms of explosiveness, 96.52 in terms of speed, and 93.11 in terms of flexibility for his size. Has pretty much Pro Bowl potential based on his athleticism traits. And when you look at the averages at the position, the only major question mark with him is his explosiveness. Very fast, very flexible, but explosive lower body strength is, the lower body explosiveness is not exactly his best all-around trait. So again, very good chance that he could become a long-term starter or better, but his explosiveness is a real legit sort of concern with him. Then, of course, we get to Jalen Holmes, edge out of Ohio State. When you get to his production data, 11.80 in terms of solo tackle data, 3.54 in terms of sack data, and 1.77 in terms of tackle for loss data. Doesn't get anywhere near where he needs to hit in terms of All-Pro potential or Pro Bowl potential based on his data. And athleticism-wise, doesn't have All-Pro or Pro Bowl potential because of his flexibility score, but does hit at least starter threshold here, 71.24 in terms of explosiveness, 76.50 in terms of speed, and 40.57 in terms of flexibility for his size. With a guy like this, you're basically looking at a guy who's most likely going to be a backup rotational guy, which is what he was at Ohio State. But as far as All-Pro, Pro Bowl potential, I just see as very unlikely because of his production data and because of how bad his flexibility score is. Then, of course, we get to Tyler Conklin, tight end out of Central Michigan. When you look at his production data, 63.68 in terms of passing yards, market share production, which pretty much hits above the Pro Bowl threshold, but not exactly near the All-Pro threshold. And when you look at the averages at the position, he is kind of below what the average All-Pro, Pro Bowl, and starter score is in terms of his market share data. But he does have some good athleticism traits, 96.09 in terms of explosiveness, 56.95 in terms of speed, and 80.34 in terms of flexibility for his size. The one major trait he lacks is speed for his size, but definitely explosive, definitely flexible. I think there's a pretty good shot that Tyler Conklin can become a long-term starter based on his explosion and based on his flexibility traits. Then, of course, you get to Daniel Carlson, punter out of Auburn. When you look at his production score, he hit a 94.31 punting average score, and that's compared to every single punter since the 2001 college football season. When it comes to punting data, I don't really have a lot of information in terms of what makes a success, like what the thresholds are when it comes to punting scores at the college level. But just know that General Carlson is a guy who, based on the statistics, was a pretty good statistical punter at the college level. Then, of course, we get to Colby Gossage, offensive guard out of App State. When you get to his athleticism traits, 35.31 in terms of explosiveness, 71.29 in terms of speed, and 75.63 in terms of flexibility for his size. Doesn't quite have all-pro or Pro Bowl potential because of his explosion traits, but definitely has a pretty good shot to become a long-term starter. When you look at the averages at the position, the only area where he lags behind is his explosion trait, but definitely has good speed, good flexibility. I do think there's a good shot that Colby can become a long-term starting guard. Of course, you get to Adi Arana, edge out of Tulane. When you look at his production data, 21.32 in terms of solo tackle data, 30.43 in terms of sack data, and 9.87 in terms of tackle for loss data. Doesn't have all-pro potential or Pro Bowl potential when you look at his production traits. And when you look at his athleticism data, 94.05 in terms of explosiveness, 91.84 in terms of speed, and 43.07 in terms of flexibility for his size. Another player very similar to Jalen Holmes, explosive, fast, not very flexible. For whatever reason, I think the Vikings are I don't know what they're doing 100% data-wise, but I do think that they seem to be going after explosion and speed traits and ignoring flexibility traits, and I think that ultimately is going to be their Achilles heel here, and ignoring production data as well. So we'll see what happens with him, but very unlikely that he becomes a Pro Bowl to All-Pro player, and his production is so low that it also would be pretty surprising if he became a long-term starter. And lastly, we get to Devante Downs, linebacker out of California. His solo tackle production score was 22.32 out of 100. Doesn't hit the 90 percentile, or 77 percentile production area. And the starter threshold is 20.5, but the average starter score is 79.20 out of 100. And there's no athleticism testing for Devante Downs at his pro day or combine. He wasn't invited to the combine. So ultimately, not a lot to really go on here in terms of projection, but we'll see what happens. So overall, when you look at the Minnesota Vikings draft class, I think the big things you can take from it is they did take some successful players. I think Mike Hughes, Brian Allen, Tyler Conklin, Colby Gossage, Daniel Carlson. I think all those guys have a very good shot to become long-term starters or better, potentially, except for a couple of them. I think some of them are kind of capped because of athleticism traits. But they do have a chance to become successful players. Whereas I think guys like Jalen Holmes and Adi Arana are players where I think there is a miscommunication in the data. Because you have to understand, if you only do data for 3 to 4 years, you start to go, well, this is the trait that matters, and then you ignore other traits, and then you end up drafting two guys who aren't productive and not very flexible. So ultimately, I don't think those two picks are really going to work out long term. I think they're getting a little too funny, I guess, when it comes to those two particular players. I do understand where they're going with those picks. It's just that based on the data, flexibility and production really matter, and those are two major factors that those guys lack. Overall, though, not a terrible draft class by any stretch of the imagination, but there definitely is not a lot of high-quality players in this particular draft class. And of course, my name is James Coburn. You can find my other work at draftcoburn.wordpress.com. You can also follow me on Twitter at Geometrics. And if you like this content and you want more content like this, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Share this video as well with anybody that you know. Hit that notification button so you're always reminded when another video of mine drops. And I'll talk to you guys in the next video. Peace!